Good evening, everyone. Yes, are we ready? Good. Welcome to the Brattleboro Select Board meeting for Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. This is a regular Select Board meeting. And Yoshi, has the meeting been properly warned?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. All right, first order of business is to approve the minutes of December 14th and January 4th. I trust the Select Board has had a chance to review. Is there any discussion? All right, Daniel, would you like to make a motion?
I would. I move to approve the minutes of December 14th, 2021 and January 4th, 2022.
Thank you. Daniel has made a motion to approve the minutes of December 14th and January 4th. All Select Board members in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's 5-0. Thank you very much. As for chairs remarks, I don't have any. Yoshi?
I have no comments.
All right. Do Select Board members have comments or committee reports? Daniel?
Thanks to DPW staff for the snowstorm. And if I understood the flashing sign correctly today, is there snow removal tonight?
I believe it is.
I believe so. Okay.
Were you in fact thanking the DPW for the snowstorm?
No, during the snowstorm on the holiday.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Tim?
I have something. So it's a bit of a procedural thing that has been bugging me a little bit, and I just thought I'd just throw this out here just to try to nudge us towards maybe what I would think of is a slightly better way to do things. On the consent agenda, we have quite a bit on the consent agenda today. And I've just been getting concerned that the way we handle it is a little bit quick for anybody just coming to the meeting or taking a quick glance at the agenda. Today there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items on the agenda. And my suggestion, I'm not sure how leadership feels about this, but my suggestion might be to try to give the consent agenda just the top line subject matters before public participation. I tried to do that when I was chair because I thought that gave people the opportunity to then, during public participation, chime in on, hey, I'd love a select board member to pop out this item from this consent agenda so that I can ask some questions about it. Otherwise, what happens is public participation happens, then we get to consent agenda, and then everybody hears about it, and we pretty quickly go right to voting.
Well, we can also ask at that, after they're read, if anyone has a comment. And we can do it then.
Yeah, I think it just feels like you're absolutely right. I just feel like, especially when there's like 6 or 7 items like tonight, it's really good to take a breath and let people raise hands, especially on Zoom. Just a procedural suggestion as my comments.
And is there an item that you'd like to call out from the consent agenda?
Oh, are we there yet? We're not there yet.
Oh, all right.
Unless you want to.
Well, you could do it now, but it doesn't matter. Okay, let's move on to, is there any other select board members who have comments?
FY23 budget. Let's get it done. That's my comment.
All right, go team. Let's ask if there are members of the public who would like to speak on an item that is not on tonight's agenda. And Patrick, I can't see, so please tell me.
There are no hands raised at this time. Oh, hold on. I take that back. There's one
Okay.
hand raised. This will be Kurt Dimes.
All right, good evening, Kurt. Enter and sign in.
Hello, hello. My computer is set up tonight for 2 people. My neighbor Laura would like to speak about the need for better snow plowing and icing or de-icing of sidewalks. I would like to make a comment about the stalled CSRT procedures. Would you like, could I go first as long as it's all right?
You're here, let's go.
Okay. I recall, I think everybody here should recall that the Police Review Committee, the Public Safety Review Committee was begun with a special emphasis for citizen supervision and oversight of the police department. And it was very much part of the procedure because the committee was explicitly formed without a policeman on the committee. And by a whole lot of, back and forth with the documents and, the implementation table and then the such and so memorandum, and then back and forth between town staff and the select board, people lost sight of the fact that it was supposed to be a citizen-led procedure, and too much of the final say about many proposals was left to town staff, meaning the interim police chief, Mr. Carrigan. And that is not what was intended by the committee, and it's rather ironic and insulting to the committee that was supposed to be supervising and having oversight over the police to end up for them being their work to be supervised by the police. And I think the board should recognize this and find a way to recover the initiative that the CSRT started. Well, actually, it didn't start it, but that they continued. The BCS proposals for safe policing began in 2017. Thank you. Would you like to hear from my friend now?
Sure, let's.
Let me step up here. Identify yourself and say you live in District 2.
I'm Laura O'Brien, and I live in District 2. I have found walking around town today that these sidewalks are very treacherous. They are all covered in ice. I went down Canal Street today from Price Chopper to Pine Street. Walking down either the left or right side of the street, you have to walk in the street because these sidewalks are absolutely sheer ice. You go down them, you literally slip and slide. You can't really walk in the road because you're taking the chances of getting hit by a car. So there's really no place to walk. For people who don't drive, it makes it really hard to get around. Even walking through downtown today, the sidewalks are really icy. I didn't know if there was a way we could get out and have somebody sand these sidewalks. Even the sides of the street that there leaves a small space for you to walk, it's icy. It's very, very inconvenient for people who don't drive. I do use the bus a lot, and I had to use that for most of the day to get around, but unfortunately it didn't really work with my schedule today. So I did have to do some walking, which I don't mind doing. It's literally impossible to walk down the hill in front of the hospital. It was literally sheer ice. I had to walk in the street, or I had to walk in the snow.
Thank you for your comment. I'm sure we all understand that we got about a foot of snow yesterday. So just as Daniel was complimenting the DPW for the handling of the snow, it's not perfect. But I think today of all days would not necessarily be the best day to judge the sidewalk conditions of Brattleboro.
Oh, well, I found this after like the last snowstorm we had and stuff I fell walking downtown after the last snowstorm we had because the sidewalks weren't sanded. And I bruised my knee pretty bad. And I know that other people have fallen and hit their heads and other body parts on the sidewalks, not only this snowstorm, but the last snowstorm. So that is why I'm bringing it to your attention.
Well, thank you. And we will bring that to the attention of the DPW.
Okay, thank you.
Liz, can
Yes, Tim.
Yes, Laurel, you're probably leaving right now, but I just wanted to say I totally agree with you that the sidewalks were very difficult after this latest storm. I had to go pick up my car down on the corner, and I did have to do, as you pointed out, walk in the street very carefully instead of walk on the sidewalks. It's actually, I think, been the very worst conditions that you could imagine that just happened because we had this heavy wet snow, and then the sidewalk plow came through, and in front of my house on High Street, all the water came rushing down and then kind of pooled and created this mini ice skating rink right on the sidewalk area. Then you have the big mound because the removal of many streets, but not all, of course, is happening tonight. So you had this unfortunate situation today where we have not yet had removal. We had all this meltage, very quick freezing, just the worst conditions. The reality of the situation is we just only have so much potential to make sidewalks safe. I went out there in front of my house and I sanded as much as I could, and I promptly ran out of sand. So we do rely on citizens to try to help us out as much as you can, because we have the capacity to not cover every sidewalk, but you're definitely being heard, and it's definitely a concern of ours, and we'll be talking about how to improve things under these very difficult conditions we just had. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Anyone else? Patrick?
I think there may be. I suppose Kurt's done.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and no, there are no others.
All right, thank you very much. All right, on to the consent agenda. I will read the topics, and then we will give both the select board and the public a chance to speak if they so desire. All right, first item, annual appointments for ratification at representative town meeting. Town clerk, town attorney, interim town treasurer. Second item, annual contract renewal with town attorney. Third item, bike walk master plan grant agreement. Fourth item, Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation Water Infrastructure Financing Division. Number 5, bus service update. And number 6, mask mandate renewal. If there's anyone who would like further discussion on any of these topics before we vote, please let me know. Yes, Daniel.
I have a question, and I don't really want to prolong it because I know the whole point of the consent agenda is not to prolong things. I just want to say that, like, if somebody wants to discuss this, we got to pull it and then put it at the end.
Yes.
Not discuss it now.
Yes.
Okay.
Are there any hands up, Patrick?
Go ahead.
Mr. Wessel.
I'd like to pull that little one at the end, number 6, or on my agenda, number F, mask mandate renewal.
Very good. We'll move that to the end of the agenda.
Thank you.
All right. Unfinished business. F. Yes, Jessica.
May I make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
What a good idea.
What? High fist bump. No, no.
Okay, so moved.
Great. Jessica has moved the consent agenda. All select board members in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 5-0. Unfinished business. FY23 budget. Review final details. Patrick, would you like to introduce this topic?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So I'm sure the board and the public will recall that at the conclusion of your last meeting on January 4th, there were really only 2 open items as it relates to the fiscal 23 budget. Finalizing the capital request and the use of fund balance. I'd like to speak to both of those just briefly, and then let you have your discussion. In terms of the use of fund balance, I know it's probably been said a few times and written about several times over the course of this budget cycle, but if the town was to adhere strictly to the using only what's in excess of 10% of the unassigned general fund balance in the preparation of the budget, we would have left the use of fund balance at about $50,000, which is quite low. And as town manager Elwell had mentioned early on in the process, the reason for this stems from having prepaid some fiscal 22 expenses in fiscal 21. when we, at the same time, raised taxes in fiscal 22 for those same budgeted expenses. So as Peter said at one point in time, all things being equal, that money will be there at the end of the year. And I believe that's correct. The board had discussed at your last meeting a range of potential uses of fund balance that were on the low end about 249 and on the high end at about $350,000. As Peter pointed out before he left, neither of these would be irresponsible. However, I do believe that one is a little riskier than the other, and that is the 350. I would make a case for the use of the 249, and here's why. All things being equal at the end of the year, that money will be there. However, we've got 6 months of this year still to go. Any number of different unforeseen circumstances could arise, and I would just caution the board from expecting the best, because the best doesn't always happen. And the target that we're aiming for now is a little smaller than the one we've aimed for in previous years. And the reason for that is in previous years, we could pretty reliably depend upon there being some savings from vacancies within the police department roster. But $200,000 of that, we've now said that can't work as cushion against any other, unforeseen expenses. We're going to set that aside for the community safety fund, which is fine, but the target just got a little smaller. In addition to that, we set aside $70,000 of unbudgeted funds for the fossil-free facilities funds. Again, the target just got a little smaller. Wouldn't say that it's irresponsible to go as high as 350, but this might be an opportunity where caution is a good thing. In terms of any potential other capital requests, there are two other items. They actually are listed on the agenda under new business, which is proper because they would be new business, but they really kind of come to play in this early discussion in the unfinished business, because it relates directly to what we might do with a request for capital. And while those items will be discussed in greater detail, I think what I can say is there was a request made of the board to try and accelerate the bike lanes that are planned for Western Avenue. As it is currently structured within the budget, there's $12,000 set aside to serve as a grant match to a VTrans grant. And if we were to pursue that particular pathway, the new bike lanes would be likely installed on Western Avenue sometime in 2023. But as some members of the community have pointed out to the board, if we were to pay for the entire thing ourselves using only local resources, we could conceivably have that project completed in 2022. And wouldn't that be a better thing? I'll leave that to your judgment. But in looking over the budget implications, I have shown presented you with a table. And what it shows is the tax increase, the increase in capital spending, et cetera. And it shows it with the budget as it is, with the budget plus this item, with the budget plus a second item, and with the budget plus both items. The second item has to do with a request Dan Tyler will be discussing with you in probably just a few minutes. And that is for a cost overrun in a sidewalk replacement project. As part of fiscal 22's sidewalk replacement, the Department of Public Works is planning to replace the sidewalks along South Main Street in preparation for redoing and repaving South Main Street. This is an ideal time to get that project done and done right. We put that body of work out to bid, and the bids came back higher than anticipated, $88,000 higher than anticipated. It was a competitive process, and the bidders are all qualified bidders. We will be recommending that the board award that project to the qualified low bidder. But in order to be able to afford that, we would be taking funds away from the fiscal 23 projects to help cover the cost overrun in fiscal '22. If the board wanted to avoid that, we could add an additional 88,000 to the capital request, and we could stay on pace with a whole series of projects that the department's been planning for some time. And so in the table that I've presented to the board, you've got a couple of different options for use of fund balance. You've got the 249, and you've got the 300, and you've got the 350. And in each case, there is shown the budget as it stands, the budget plus the 16,000 for the new bike lanes, the budget plus the 88,000 for the keeping the sidewalks on track, and then the budget plus both. I think you've got a range of really good options here. There's really nothing that I think you should consider off limits. Again, I would encourage you to be a little conservative, given the fact that some of our historical resources that we could rely upon have been consumed for other worthwhile purposes. But I think that's a decision best left to the board.
Thank you, Patrick. All right, select board members want to weigh in on this? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna get right to the straight to the chase here on it. So I'm in favor of the 300,000. I think I want to cut it down the middle. So I think the board has a responsibility to try to balance both being responsible and not taking too much risk, as Patrick has done a great job of elaborating on, while at the same time trying to not overburden the taxpayer when, if we had the operating surplus that we were expecting of over $500,000, the board has a responsibility to try to get as close to that as we can, while also being responsible and not taking on too much risk for the town in the next 6 months. So I think with that in mind, the 249 seems a little low. The 350 is a little high. So let's go in the middle, 300, and that alleviates some of it. And it's not perfect, but it feels like the right decision to make.
Okay, Goldilocks.
Yeah, so let's see.
We have other comments?
It's the last discussion of this matter.
Correct.
We need to
Yes.
settle it tonight.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't see any problem with Ian's argument. I think it makes a lot of sense. I understand the caution involved in 249, and I think at the beginning of this budget process, we saw a budget that was very lean for the most part, and wanted the taxpayers to also see an equivalent impact on their tax bill. And so increasing the use of fund balance a little bit this year, and a little bit further than we might usually go, will relieve some of that burden on the taxpayer. And I think that's a modest way to do it.
How's the other side of the table feel?
I'm a fan of the middle way, as
All right.
some Buddhists would say, but I am a little bit, I was kind of looking at the gestalt, the whole picture here on this sheet that Patrick provided for us. So I sort of, does anybody else get the feeling we should address sidewalks and bike lanes before making a final decision? Because it kind of feeds into my opinion on the use of the fund balance.
I was thinking a lot about this. I don't think so.
Okay.
Wait a
Well,
minute.
I mean,
Wait a minute. So your proposal did not include sidewalks and?
My proposal would basically incorporate either or neither. It's
Okay.
the 300.
that was something new. I hadn't really thought of it that way. I was sort of thinking it as they're all interrelated.
I think that the 300,000 proposal, be it with the sidewalks, with the bikes, without either, one of them is the right proposal, no matter what.
Yeah, in that case, I'm not opposed to that either, but I would just say that, can we have the discussion and evidence and talk about the individual items before we move on to the
So
other
at this
portions of the
time,
chart?
we'd like to perhaps vote on the 300,000 number and keeping the add-ons till later in the meeting.
Yeah.
Well, that's how it's warned,
Yeah,
but Tim wants to discuss it all now.
No. No, I just want to make sure that,
that we have a decent discussion about those items when the time is appropriate.
absolutely.
All right, Jessica, you fine with that?
I'm delighted with the middle road.
All right, then. Let's have a motion then. Mr. Guzan.
Yeah. It says that there's no action required.
What do you know?
So there's very clear direction coming to staff. I'm hearing go with 300,000, and if that works for you, I'll consider that the board's marching orders. And no motion would be required. If you'd
Right.
like to make a motion and vote on it, that's.
No, we'll do our voting on the budget next week. Right?
Correct, yes.
Okay,
Oh. We have a meeting next week?
we have a meeting next week?
On the 25th.
Yeah.
Oh,
That'll be to warn, there'll be 2 items on that agenda, assuming that's all you want. Traditionally, that's all we have, finalizing the budget and approving the warning.
Did everybody know?
So we're giving a sort of last look at all the budget items tonight and taking a sort of look at the warning. Those will be approved presumably next Tuesday on the 25th.
All right. Everybody check their calendars. Shall we move on to the next item? Safety improvements at the intersection of Canal Street and South Main Street and on Oak Street. Second reading, public hearing, and adoption of ordinance. Patrick, would you like to discuss this?
Yes. So the board will recall, you spoke about this. We had a brief discussion about this 2 weeks ago. That was the first reading. This is the second reading where the board is asked to hold a public hearing and to hear if there's any feedback from the public on these 2 ordinance changes. Then if you're ready, you would cast a vote, and if the vote was approved, staff would take the new ordinance, publish it in the paper, and then 60 days following the publication, it would become new town ordinance. The 2 items before you are 2 items that have been thoroughly vetted by the Traffic Safety Committee. The first one is an attempt to make some safety improvements at the corner of Canal Street and South Main Street. And this would install a stop sign on Canal Street heading north, right at the intersection with South Main Street. The second change would be to adjust limited parking on Oak Street. This would be in front of the community house school. And this would provide for designated pickup and drop off during a brief period in the morning and then a second period in the afternoon for pickup of children, and provide 1 hour parking in between those 2 pickup and drop off times.
All righty, thank you, Patrick. And I recall from our last public hearing that there were members of the public who spoke in favor of each of those 2 items. And let's hear from our select board member who's a member of the Traffic Safety Committee.
Thank you. I wanted to just clear something up about the Canal Street stop sign. I had a couple of people speak to me about it, and maybe we hadn't been clear enough that it is not a stop sign for both directions of traffic. So if you are coming down Canal Street towards the junction, you will have a stop sign when you meet Canal and South Main. For the traffic leaving the junction, going up the hill, they will have a yield sign. So if there is a pedestrian crossing, they will yield to that pedestrian. I think some people have been under the impression that they will exit the junction and then have to stop. And that's exactly why we don't propose an RRF, a flashing crosswalk. No one knows what an RRFB is. I know what an RRFB is, but the public don't care about that. And so I just wanted to make sure that is clear to members of the public who may well be attending this hearing or may read about it a few days from now and then be mad about it. I think it's a decent solution to part of the problem, and I hope that we'll continue to work on the other piece of the problem which is pedestrians crossing in the part of Canal Street that is not safe to cross on. And we have a traffic safety committee meeting on Thursday at 8 a.m. But now would be the time to speak to this.
All right, very good. Are there other select board members who would like to talk about this action? How about members of the public?
There are currently none.
All right. Well, this is our public hearing. So we'll just give anyone another minute to chime in if they so choose. And otherwise, one of you should be readying a motion. Mr. Quip, wait, do I see a hand?
member of the public.
There is a Jonathan Weber.
Mr. Weber, please join us.
Hi there. My name is Jonathan Weber. I work for Local Motion. I've been helping folks in Brattleboro, including the Brattleboro for Coalition for Active Transportation, advocate for some improved walking and biking infrastructure. So I want to just chime in on the agenda item that's going to be discussed later on around increasing funding for the Western Ave bike lanes so that they can go forward in this construction season. I really encourage you to go ahead and add that to the budget. I think it's an additional $16,000 that'll allow those to move forward this year rather than waiting, to move them forward if grant funding is awarded. I think this will allow staff to move to other priority projects. It'll build a lot of great momentum going into the walk bike plan. There are also.
All right, hold on for just a second. That's all very well and good, but it's not the motion before us now. Or do you have any comments to make about Canal Street and South Main Street?
Oh, excuse me. I
Oak
thought,
Street?
sorry, based on what you said, it sounded like we were in public comment. I apologize.
Yes, so let's wait. And are there any more comments from the public? All right. How about a motion, Daniel?
I'd love to make a motion. I move to adopt the changes to the Brattleboro Code of Ordinances, Appendix C, Section 16 to 70, stop signs, and to Appendix C, Section 16-101, I guess is how you say it, limited parking as presented.
Thank you, Daniel. Daniel has moved to adopt the changes to the Brattleboro Code of Ordinances, Appendix C, Section 16-70, stop signs, and to Appendix C, Section 16-101, limited parking as presented. All select board members in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right, 5-0. Thank you very much. Now, we are on to new business. Western Avenue Bike Lane project timing. Patrick, do you want to address this? Do we need
Sure.
Sue?
So I'd be happy to take this up once again. I think the board has a pretty clear idea about the decision which comes before you. As it is presently contemplated, there is $12,000 in the fiscal 23 capital to serve as a grant match to VTrans. We're really good with getting grants from VTrans, so we'll likely be successful if we pursue this. And if we follow that course of action, the most likely implementation would occur in 2023. There has been a request made of the board from several community members who have been circulating emails asking, what if we were to pay that with cash and use only local resources? We might be able to get that project completed in 2022. And so it's a pretty straightforward, which direction would the board like to proceed?
We're talking about an extra $16,000 to save ourselves a year.
That's correct.
All right. How do we feel about that,
Awesome.
select board members?
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a very important note on here that we really are making a couple of assumptions for this early move, which would be the biggest assumption would be that VTrans will be, quick at granting our requests. I think it's not always the case, not to malign them, But also we would be dependent on finding a contractor that could fit it into their schedule. Do I have that correct?
Good point. All right. How do people feel about this action, one way or the other?
Were we gonna get anyone else, like Sue?
Yeah.
Was Sue gonna appear, or?
Sue Fillion's in the meeting, we can.
Well, I'm just curious
invite her
if she
She
could
wrote
have.
the memo.
She did write the memo?
She wrote the
I
memo.
would be curious to hear from Sue. I feel like Tim just did a very good job sort of itemizing a couple of the reasons why, but I'd be curious if there are any other reasons why this assumption as to it being completed in 2022, what are the other factors that are being weighed?
Let's ask for Sue then.
And she always fades up, so I love hearing from Sue because her camera fades up beautifully. Watch this. How do you do it?
That's funny.
Welcome, Sue.
Hi,
Please
everybody.
enlighten us.
Sure. Yeah, well, the two options, I guess, the request is if the town was to fully fund it, we think that, we could do the design work that would be done by DPW. We'd still need V-Trans to review it. So kind of assuming a 30-day review. We don't need any right-of-way acquisition. We did do the scoping study. So really it's just, getting their approval. When we started the scoping study, in order to do any bike lanes in the first place, they were very clear they wanted that scoping study done. And so I think, having that should make the review easier from them. And then, we could put it out to bid. I mean, the big variable is what are the contractors' availability. So I think according to Public Works, we'd likely have a contractor to do the line striping and the grinding up of the existing lines, or however they handle that. With the grant funding timeline, so the project manager that I worked with for the scoping study indicated that, applications should be due in June with probably award in August, and then there'll be a little, signing the contract, going back and forth there. And again, we feel more comfortable with like a spring timeline for construction with that, just because at the time of year contractors will be trying to get their work done. So that's kind of the timeline there. It pushes construction into 2023. But again, both cases are going to need some V-Trans to look at it and sign off on it.
So were you just describing something that's essentially a 6 months wait from instead of spring to fall?
I'm not sure I'm following you.
Like if award is in August,
Mhm.
would contractors be able to be lined up to complete it before snowfall?
Dan, when I spoke to Dan Tyler, he wasn't so sure that contractors would necessarily be available. They might be all booked through the fall and hurrying to do the work that they have.
Yeah.
So it's a bit more variable if we go out to construct in the fall, to bid in the fall.
I see you, Ian. And just one more question, and that is if anyway, let's ask you. Go ahead.
I didn't mean to distract you.
No, that's fine.
I apologize.
You totally did.
I definitely did.
I don't know what that question was.
Yeah, I know. You have it?
No.
No. That's my bad. Hi, Sue.
Ian.
So the next item that the board is going to be considering is paying an additional $90,000 because the bid price that came back was higher than expected.
That's my question.
So, what is there a potential that could happen here? Well, I know, but I'm curious.
So I'm not as familiar with pricing on sidewalk and paving projects. Dan did take a look at he said that if the estimates came from V-Trans's guidelines for the scoping study, which is where the 28,000 has come from, then likely that's a good price. They tend to be higher because they're just a little bit more conservative in the estimates. So he felt comfortable with the 28,000.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, I would like to know what you think, and I just want to say that it's not something that we generally do. I mean, we usually wait for the grant and proceed. So this is a departure, and so that's why it's important to hear how we all feel about it. And Daniel, you want to?
Right. So I feel like the thing to weigh is, free money from a grant and a slightly slower pace versus expediting a process and spending $16,000 of taxpayer money on bike lanes that I know are valuable to many of our taxpayers. And we know that, in the past, we've taken actions that we've felt like this is an important thing to do for the people of Brattleboro to improve their quality of life. And so we will put money towards it. Yeah. I got to say, in this one, it feels almost like a toss-up, like the uncertainty around whether or not, if we did just fully fund it with town money, whether we'd get it constructed all that much sooner than, if we go after the grant money. Is it worth, I suppose the question is it worth $16,000 to have something done 6 months sooner?
Yep, that's the question.
I mean, there's a little piece of me that's like, yeah, it is. Like this is something that people have been wanting to see for years, right? And coming back to like the skate park saga, right? There were times when we were like, okay, let's put a chunk towards this because we want it to happen sooner. And this is not as big a magnitude, thankfully. But people in this town have wanted better bike lanes for a long time, and this is not a lot of money, and we could make that happen a little bit sooner. But there's also a piece of me that's like, it's very likely we'd get grant money for it, and that's saving the taxpayers some money, and it's not like it would put it back years,
Right.
like months.
Right. All right, let's hear from this side.
Been very sort of talky today, but I'll go ahead. So this is not a lot of money. We have a $20 million budget, almost, or actually we do, depending on what we choose tonight. I knew that. But it's also $16,000 of money that will be coming from the state for the grant. And I feel like it's a little bit of a gamble that we even sneak it in any earlier by neglecting the $16,000 and shifting it to taxpayers. So it's kind of the principle of the thing, because it's not a huge amount of money, but it is, if you look at our charts, it's 0.1% of an increase. So I think I'm going to vote no for.
Yeah, I just want to keep in mind that we have public who will continue to speak on this issue, but
Sure, but that's my current feelings.
Yeah.
I think we should go with the grant.
Great. Jessica?
Yeah, I'm on the same page as Tim. Nice to say that sometimes. But that I think that it's important to acknowledge, we are committed to this. It is in next year's budget to match this grant, to apply for this grant, to do this work. But whether it's done in the fall or the spring, I think we could just do our best to continue to be thrifty and save taxpayers that $16,000 by partnering with the state. And there's nothing so terrible about waiting 6 months if we say we are committed to this.
And if you take it on the grand scale, if everyone advocated for speeding up their work so we wouldn't have state money involved, it would be chaos. The budget process would break down. Yes, Daniel.
Here's the thing. Taxpayers aren't going to notice the change in the tax rate because of this decision. But taxpayers and users of our road system will notice that bike lanes showed up much earlier than they thought. So which impact do you want?
Which shoulder are you?
Well, let's say we hope it will show up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that this has been an interesting sort of exercise for me as a board member to have an opportunity to sort of discuss this question of how much money are we willing to pay to make something that members of the community want to happen a little faster? Like, that's an interesting question. And how much free money are we willing to pass up for it? I came into this meeting kind of more leaning towards Daniel's side. But I don't know which side. Oh, maybe not. I got classic quip. Does he have a side? Who knows? Somewhere. I came more towards paying the full amount to try to get it done earlier. But I feel pretty confident now that I am on the right side of my room here, that the information that we received from Patrick and from Sue, it's not sufficient to know if it actually will happen in 2022 or not. And I think even though it's not that much money, the idea that we could take all of it on ourselves, it could still potentially be more, we don't know for certain. And it might still not happen in 2022. It just seems like too many factors that haven't been addressed. So at the moment, at least I'm for scenario 1 and getting the grant.
Right. And I also think it's a bad precedent, but let's hear from the public. The gentleman who spoke before, he's welcome to come back and finish.
That's Jonathan Weber.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right.
I mean, it's an interesting thing to wait.
Yeah, no, it is.
So yeah, and sorry about that. The gentleman who embarrassed himself earlier is back.
Oh, no. But please enlighten us now while we're engaged on this topic.
Sure. So yeah, I've been working with folks in Brattleboro to move projects like this forward. I think there are a couple key reasons why it's worth moving this forward in a faster way. The first for me, it always on these projects comes down to safety. So there have been 2 crashes in this segment between the exit and between Green Street in the past 5 years. So, reducing the dangers present on this corridor over that period, I think is worthwhile, right? If you can make this corridor safer 6 months sooner, that can potentially, reduce the chances of a crash in that time. And I think $16,000 is a pretty small amount to pay for that improvement. Second, the town's going to be beginning to work on its bike ped master plan. I think that this corridor, this is a central corridor in Brattleboro. It's an essential one for folks to be able to traverse safely. And $16,000 is a very small amount of additional money to make this improvement happen in alignment with that bike walk master plan. It'll show that the town is really committed to making these improvements in a serious way, and it'll show the public the value of making these improvements on their streets. So that's another reason. And third, we are in a climate crisis. Improving infrastructure for walking and biking in places like Brattleboro is key right now. And we are, on a tight timeline to make these improvements happen. Getting this done in a faster fashion allows staff to move on to the next project and think about the next stage of that Western Ave project farther down, closer to the town center. So I hope you'll move it forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Jonathan. Sue, I have a question for you.
Who's listening?
I'm back.
There you go. Thank you, Sue. Jonathan talked about the bike ped master plan.
Yes.
Can you tell us how this project fits into that?
Well, the bike
has
ped
it been conducted already? I don't know.
No. So that we just got a municipal planning grant to conduct the bike ped master plan this year. So it's we haven't put out a proposal yet. We hope to do that in February. It's going to be looking at, what are the infrastructure, what are the areas where we need some improvements for the bicycle and pedestrian network. So, this would be a piece that's complete. It, would be, considered under the existing conditions and how do we make further linkages. But yeah,
right. So it's already designed, and whether we decide to do it now or later, it's just an item on the list of
yes.
the master plan.
Although I would say it's not designed yet. But that's something we'll work on this spring.
And that's something that DPW is designing or someone else has to design? They're doing it.
DPW should be able to do the majority of the design. If there might be a small piece of engineering that we'll need to, work with a firm to do.
And if we were to apply to V-Trans, that would be in June.
That's when I've been told the applications will be due.
Thank you. All right. Lady and gentlemen. Kathleen, yes? Hi, Kathleen.
Hi. I'm here representing the Brattleboro Coalition for Active Transportation, as well as Kevin O'Brien and Kate O'Connor, and I don't know if anyone else from the coalition is here, but we're the ones that put in the request. And I just wanted to say I agree with everything Jonathan Weber said. And a year, it might be a year before. If we wait for the grant, it might be a year longer rather than 6 months. And a year in the life of people who bicycle is a very long time. And we have so little bicycle infrastructure. This is something that's fairly simple and straightforward to do. And I just think it would make a lot of sense to go forward and try to do it as soon as we can. We have applied for a bicycle-friendly community designation, and we got an honorable mention for applying. But to move to the next level, to be a bronze level, having bicycle lanes for people to more safely bicycle in is one of the requirements. And we would really like to see Brattleboro become a bicycle-friendly community, not just for the designation, but to be a safer place. So.
And if we get designated, do we get any money?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. So,
There's Kevin.
thank you, Kathleen.
Hello,
Kevin? Hello?
you with me? Am I there?
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm also with the Brattleboro Coalition of Active Transport and wanted just to echo and support those other comments. And I think for me, one of the key things as well is the connection getting over to Living Memorial Park, especially for people that don't drive or can't drive, youth, adults, everyone. And I think that this portion of the roadway having the bicycle improvements will really show off Brattleboro's commitment to having it be a livable and a place that's on the forefront of thinking about climate change and mitigating some of the impacts where we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, Patrick? Okay. All right. Well, we have quite a quandary ahead of us. Daniel?
I wanted to appeal to fuller planning commission members and ask Sue what our town plan says around being a community that is safe for cyclists. I'm assuming that in our town plan, we sort of say we want to be a community that is safe for cyclists.
We definitely do. I don't have the language in front of me, but we do speak about complete streets, planning roadways that meet the needs of everybody, not just cars. So
yeah. And so whilst this is, maybe not our usual budget process and may not expedite it much more than 6 months, I think as Kathleen pointed out, a day in the life of a cyclist around here is a long day. And, 6 months is an improvement. Safety, is likely to be increased on that stretch of road. And so I think I'm going to go for, let's put it all up and get it done a little sooner if we can. And if we can't, you can all blame me.
In gross manipulation of the planning sentiments of the board members, I would have to agree with you. You know, I think that there's great interest by concerned citizens for this, and I don't think it's too much to ask. Jessica?
I've got a question for you, Daniel, as the person on the traffic safety committee.
Yes.
So that I have two questions. Maybe one is for Kathleen or the bicyclists out there. So the question for you, Daniel, is this like, as a traffic safety committee person, is this an area of concern that it's been mentioned that there have been 2 accidents that led to injuries in this route, and that's really
Let me answer you honestly.
yeah.
I cannot say that in the 2 years that I've served on the traffic safety committee that we have discussed a pedestrian or that we've discussed a cyclist injury on that stretch of road. But I can tell you on this week's agenda, we have 3 incidents involving pedestrians and cyclists, one of which, had we had a bike lane on that stretch of road, maybe it would have been avoided, right? So I'm not saying that like this bike lane on this bit of road, getting there 6 months sooner will definitely avoid some accidents, but like bike lanes are likely to make things a little bit safer. Motorists are more aware that they're going to expect to see cyclists and,
Those are 3 incidents on Western Ave.
No, 3 incidents.
Okay.
So 2 on Canal Street, 1 on Putney Road.
Oh, so none on Western Ave.
No, none on Western Ave.
Okay.
Well, I would just like to chime in to answer Jessica's question too, because when we're discussing the bridge repairs on Route 9, which is essentially Western Avenue, the tremendous amount of interstate traffic, including trucks, that goes along that road is a surprise. It was a surprise to me that it's really so heavily tracked. It's a major conduit across the state of Vermont. So if you look at it in that light, I could see that a dedicated bike lane would be a good safety measure.
My other question was for the bicyclists. The idea that if we do this work and it can't get done, or the contractors can't get around to it till September or early October, is it valuable through the winter season to have it there? Thanks for nodding so vigorously, Daniel. Is it valuable to have that striping through the winter season? I don't know that much about commuting for bicycling. Daniel
I
does.
feel like I have some knowledge of the winter cycling community around here, and there is a hardcore group of people who cycle year round in this town. Lord knows how they do it, but they do. And so, having bicycle-friendly infrastructure would be a boon 12 months of the year. Today is not a good day, but yeah.
So it wouldn't be wasted.
Kathleen might have something to say about it.
Could we do both? Could we design this bike pathway, apply for the grant, and then choose not to accept it? Or is the timing? I just don't understand whether or not we could have it both ways. And for example, if we can't find a contractor in the spring and line that contractor up, then we'd want the grant if it's going to be delayed.
Another middle of the road.
So is that too far-fetched?
I could see getting it designed, putting it out to bid and see. So I don't usually deal with construction projects on bidding. So I'm wondering if if Patrick or somebody else has more experience with the actual construction projects. If you pulled back a bit, I think that there's always the language in it that you could pull it back. I don't know how that would be received.
Well, it's just because, with COVID, all the contractors are so in such flux and many things are delayed. And we might find in the spring, once it's designed and goes out to bid, that we can't find a contractor this year and
Yep.
might as well submit for the grant.
So just a note that Dan did say that he doesn't feel that we'd have any problems finding a contractor.
Oh, that's
So-
helpful. Thank you, Yoshi. All right.
Where are you at?
This guy should go first.
Yeah, should.
Yeah, go
You
ahead.
shooting on me?
Should.
First of all, I just want to point out that we decided 300,000 in 2.4 seconds. And we're arguing.
It was
I know.
so compelling.
But Yoshi, I have to tell you, in past years, this has been a $300 discussion. So we're getting somewhere because this is $16,000. And I just like, it's fine, however we decide to do this today. But I just want to point out that like Lauren came before us this morning, pointing out that we really could use a lot more sand on our ice rinks that are our sidewalks right as we speak. But our job here is to look at the big picture. And that's why your answer in planning was so surprising to me, because we're trying to plan for the long term and we're trying to slot all of our important decisions and all of the places where we need to spend money for this town. I don't like giving up $16,000 of state money and throwing it into the lap because, and I don't know how to say this, but I'm impatient too. If I bicycled, I have a bicycle, so I'm a bicyclist technically, but I don't do it every day. So I would be impatient too. I would be an activist for that. But our job here, the five of us, our job is to look at the big picture of the $20 million and decide how to move forward and what are the best ways to decide that. So I just don't like the idea of, especially with Lauren's statement, and she's absolutely right that we should have right now better sidewalks, and more sand on more stretches of sidewalk. But we're not going to, because of that statement, we're not going to say, hey, Dan, get us $16,000 more of sand and throw it down, because that's not planning, that's reacting. And I like us to look at the big picture and consider it all and just weigh out what is important, what's not important. And I also don't like it when people say, well, this will make it safer, because we really don't know that. We know for a fact that when we put down more crosswalks, it doesn't necessarily make you more safe. It creates an illusion of safety sometimes. So that's a tough statement to say that, we're saving 2 people or something if we do this.
Didn't say that.
No. But it's like, it's an easy road to go down because it appeals to the emotion of it. But I think that's not really what our job is. So, that's it.
Well, being all over the place all the time.
If it helps, there's a number of hands raised.
Oh, yeah, that'll be.
Well, that's the big question, really.
You prepared?
Yeah.
So the top one is Kevin O.
Never know.
Yeah, I think, so referencing the town plan, policy 7.2 is promote bicycle and pedestrian mobility. So that follows with this. And I would say to the question initially prompted that yes, it certainly does make a difference for safety, and that 6 months does matter. I think as we've been talking about, the infrastructure with sidewalks, if the upkeep's not there, it's not safe. So having the infrastructure of the bike lanes will provide a narrowing of the travel lanes for vehicles, which then studies have shown do force people to drive slower and be more aware of bicycles and pedestrians. So that tightening of the roadway and more people using the bicycle lanes will be, have an effect on safety. And it's hard because you don't see the safety numbers of people that don't get in crashes. You only see the ones that do get in crashes.
Thank you. You have another caller, Patrick?
We do. We have Farmies.
I wonder what the sign tells me.
Oh, yeah.
Good evening.
Hi there. Yeah, so just to sort of answer the direct question that was asked of cyclists, I bike Western Ave every day. Well, not every day. I'm not at work every day, but every day that I go to work downtown, I bike to work, and I bike down Western Ave. I'm one of those weird cyclists that I don't have a lot of opinions about bike lanes per se, but I would say that to answer Jessica's question about the timing, if having bike lanes there in the winter would mean that it would actually get plowed, that would make an enormous difference, whether the striping is there or not. Just the fact that it would actually be cleared and not force me out into the travel lane with everybody else and with all the potholes that are right where cyclists are expected to be at the current stripe. It would make a huge difference for sure, that 6 months.
Thank you, Far. Is there someone else, Patrick?
There is. Last hand up is Gary Stroud.
All right. Good evening, Gary.
Good evening. How is everybody? Happy New Year and safe one, I hope, and all. I was just chiming in and listening to what you were saying, Elizabeth, and everyone else. I did my own little personal research, I guess, as far as, incidences in Brattleboro, accidents. And as a motorist myself, especially during the summer, a lot of people are now utilizing, and more people at the influxes are using bikes and bike lanes and creating some of their own because there others aren't implemented or in places like half here. But you made a good point too, Elizabeth, about Putney, about West B, but also Putney Road. As you know, after you get to a certain point, there is no bike lane until you get to like the bridge, but it's very narrow. So that directs, but I pretty much am adamant watching the road with everybody, respecting the road. And I think that 16,000 is an old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. 16,000 compared to what a person's hospital bill is going to be, an accident insurance, going to probably be a lot less. Having that it put into place. So weighing that in, I think safety is job one for the town, for everyone. I'd like to get a bike myself and get out there, but I have to look at it from the point of view as a bicyclist as well as myself. Will I feel safe driving? And I've seen some of these lanes and how they are all set up. No, probably not. And I wouldn't probably go out there with my daughter and I. And some of them, I would just go to the parks and probably ride around. It's not too many parks. You could ride around a lake around here. So that being said, if this is part of the infrastructure bill as well, the roads in the conditions that they're in, the bike lanes, is that something that can be considered to incorporate as well and build that into that ahead of time rather than waiting? Because I can tell you, once spring comes, there's going to be a lot more bicyclists out there. So just taking that into consideration, I just like you to really, just maybe think and come back, table it and come back, maybe let's consider doing this and going forward. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Gary. All right. So the question before us is not the value of the bike lane.
Right.
That's been established, and it's either going to be this year or next year. And so the question is,
This year, maybe.
this year maybe, or next year. So the question is, do we want to forego the state funds in the hopes of accelerating the timeline of this project? So let's vote. Daniel.
I just want to put in one last plug. I think the benefit outweighs the whatever the cost, right? Like the taxpayers will not notice this $16,000, but the people who cycle will notice the expedited presence of these bike lanes. So I am in favor.
All right. Does someone want to make a motion and we'll vote on
Do we
it?
need a motion? I mean, do you want to take a straw poll? Yeah.
Yeah, let's take a straw poll.
You're for it?
I don't know where I'm at.
Oh.
I'm really struggling with this.
I thought I was the one again.
No, I think I'm,
Yes.
Ian?
I'm still in favor of scenario one.
Which is what?
Which is that we
Just waiting.
wait for the grant funding. And I would say that this is not a referendum on bike lanes. The entire
No,
board is
of
in
course
favor
not.
of the bike lanes on
No.
Western Ave. It's simply a question of balancing whether it's worth the risk of giving up a little bit of free money, and it's a very small amount we're talking about, to potentially get something installed 6 months earlier. I simply think that we haven't heard enough to really, for me to feel confident that it will. And I think it doesn't make sense to take the risk, and we should just take the funding from the grant. That we know we are like incredibly confident we will get because we have
Yes.
such a good relationship with them.
Yes,
Now we should vote
And-
just for the drama.
and Tim feels that way, and
Yes, I
Jessica's
agree.
up in the air, and I'm wishy-washy.
Oh my goodness.
Well, you're not wishy-washy. Come on, I heard you being in favor of it. You're talking about risk, and we just opted, for an extra 51 grand's worth of risk of use of fund balance. That is a risk. This is a risk about
That's a false equivalent.
it's just about risk.
That's just ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. I won't even accept
Oh my
that. I won't even accept the rest of
It
that.
does use the same word.
That's true. It uses the same word.
Good heavens.
All right,
Lead balloon.
let's have a motion. Let's call this question.
That's right.
All right, how do we motionize it?
There must be something in our,
If the board wished to vote, somebody could move to add $16,000 to the fiscal 23 capital request.
Mm.
Thanks.
If we do that, can we also, middle of the road, ask Sue to apply for the grant to support it?
I don't see why not. Belt and suspenders.
And then what happens to that money?
We
Is it just-
don't accept it.
Well, we have, I guess we stay in regular contact, and depending upon when the grant came in, and,
Or we could make a decision.
there's a whole lot of variables here.
Yeah,
Just wondering.
and also we run the risk of damaging our relationship with VTrans by dropping a grant that we apply for because we've already paid for it.
Ooh,
I just wanted it now.
All right, Daniel, you're gonna make a motion?
Yes, I move to add $16,000 to the FY 23 capital requests in order to expedite this Western Avenue bike lane. Potentially.
What was that last word, Daniel?
Potentially.
All right, Daniel has moved to add $16,000 to the FY 23 capital request for the expedited Western Avenue Bike Lane project. All select board members in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 All the select board members not in favor, please raise your hand and say nay.
Nay.
Okay,
Right.
We could do it anyway.
all right, we'll get it
Good
next year.
discussion. A good discussion.
Thank you very much.
Something to write about.
Can always go fund it, right?
All right.
She said, yeah.
I said thanks.
Sidewalk reconstruction bids on South Main Street. Patrick?
If it's all right with you, I'd like to bring in Dan Tyler.
Great.
Now, don't worry, this will take like 2 minutes
Yeah.
because it's a lot more money.
The more money, the less.
Inverse relationship. Hi, Dan.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. So Patrick already kind of laid out how this came to be. And the money we're requesting. So it all started with a grant for paving South Main Street. South Main Street is going to be used as the temporary detour when Vernon Street is closed for the Hinsdale Bridge. That's going to be a 90-day closure in the spring of 2023. So VTrans awarded us a grant of $175 to go towards the repaving of South Main Street between Main Street and Cotton Mill Hill. That's about a $218,000 project. So we're on track to complete that project. You know, we'll put it out to bid with the plan that the paving will take place later this summer. So this section of sidewalk is on the west side of South Main Street between Pine Street and just about the intersection with Cotton Mill Hill, a little north of that. There's a section of sidewalk that's in poor condition. Some of it's below the road level and ponds with water. So we really felt this was the time to take care of that section. It abuts the road. There's other sections of sidewalk on South Main Street that are in fair condition, but they're buffered by a existing curb and a grass strip. So those are easier to go back and repair sections as needed without having to cut into the new asphalt. This section is right against the road. So it's about it's 1,375 feet of sidewalk that we put out to bid. Granite curb, concrete sidewalk, widening the sidewalk slightly towards the road edge to try to achieve 5 feet. There's some areas where there's telephone poles. We can't move those. They'll be in the sidewalk in places, but we'll still be able to accomplish better width than what's there now. We got 3 bidders. They came back higher than we expected. The low bidder was LaRock & Son of Guilford for $239,869. And that's approximately $90,000 over what we have remaining in the capital sidewalk fund. So we're requesting to accept that bid from LaRock to keep this project on track and get the sidewalk done in the spring so that the paving can happen. And additionally, I'd ask that you consider increasing the capital sidewalk request for FY23, compensate for that overage, just so we can keep sidewalk projects on track. We're looking at a section of the sidewalk on the avenue, kind of up near the Station 2 going west on the opposite side of the road. There's a section that's really bad. We were hoping to put that one out with the FY23 funds. So yeah, any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
I have a question, Dan. It's kind of a procedural question, and it's like, I would assume that all over the state, projects are coming in with bids over budget. And what's everybody going to do? Will the state give you more money?
That's a good question. I haven't asked. I do know the grant that we received is specifically for resurfacing of Class 2 roadway. I don't know that, I don't know that sidewalk falls into that in any way. It's specifically a paving grant. Happy to ask the question.
Yeah, I think it's worth asking the question because, everybody is faced with this kind of COVID-related shortage and higher prices. And at the same time, the state is receiving federal infrastructure money. So maybe they would be generous with what they have.
Sure.
Patrick?
Certainly possible. I would hope that the board can rally around either incorporating the additional $88,000 into the capital request or not, so that staff can bring you back the budget you're seeking next Tuesday.
Yes, my question was definitely beside the point. I'll acknowledge that. However, I think it was a valid question. So, how do we feel about this $88,000?
Great.
You feel great.
And I just have a procedural question. So the motion is to award the bid to LaRock and Son. Do we also, is it, you just need to hear the board generally say, yes, we're also in favor of having the.
If there's at least 3 votes in favor of a budget that comes back with the $88,000 included, then
Okay.
that's what'll
So there
come
doesn't
back
need to be a
next week.
separate motion for that.
Right.
Yeah, this stretch of sidewalk, like, is almost non-existent in places. On the eastern side, it's a regular sidewalk, but on the western side, it's like, it's rough out there, and a lot of kids use that route to get to Oak Grove School. People go to
Or the
Little
high
League
school.
Field or the high school, the middle school. There's actually 3 schools on that route. It's really important that we improve it, and the utility poles really impede the ability to get a sidewalk tractor down there. I understand it's not on the sidewalk tractor route anyway, but maybe if we widen it, maybe in the future we can get it on the route if it's clearable. If you went on a stretch of sidewalk today or yesterday afternoon, you would see it is basically just ice. So let's get it done. Let's get that extra 88,000 in the budget.
Ian? Jess?
Agreed. It's an important stretch of
Tim?
sidewalk.
Absolutely agree. And can I just nerd out on granite? Because granite curbing is the most important thing to consider. I mean, I know it must be really expensive. And Dan, do you know where it comes from, by the way?
This, typically the curb comes out of the Concord, New Hampshire area.
Not
Okay.
Anyway, so some time ago, there's certain streets that I used to live on have a bunch of concrete. I don't know, they're rebar and concrete, and boy, are they in bad shape. And I don't know
Well, it's
when.
because of the salt.
Well, and all kinds of things, plows and salt, yeah, absolutely. But the investment in granite is definitely worth it in this case, so
Well, I'm sure none of us take it for granted.
we have to.
Oh.
You beat me to that joke.
Sorry.
But anyway, thank you, and I'm in favor.
All right, so let's have a vote.
Sounds like we
motion.
don't Need one?
But you need this one.
We need this one.
Award
For the bid.
bid.
Oh, award the
bid.
bid, award the bid. Yes, but not for the actual.
No.
Yeah.
Patrick
So-
has his information for the budget.
We're in favor of sidewalks, yes?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I would like a motion for the award.
Can I do the motion?
Please.
Can I include Bernie? Because I just like Bernie LaRock. Or is it- Have they changed their name?
You may certainly
Okay,
add whatever flourish you'd like to.
I'd like to make a motion to award the 2022 South Main Street Sidewalk Project to Bernie LaRock and Son.
All right, Tim has made a motion to award the 2022 South Main Street Sidewalk Project to Bernie LaRock and Son. All select board members in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
All right, now, let's invite the RTM Human Service Committee to explain to us their recommendations. Is that you, Ann?
Hi, hello.
Hi.
I'm waiting for David Miner has a report to read to you this year. So, good evening.
Good evening. Hi,
Good
David.
evening. Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm David Miner, co-chair of the Human Services Funding Review Committee, along with Ann Fielder, our other co-chair. And the rest of the committee is Gary Stroud, Kip Tewksbury, Ain Thompson, and John Kennedy. And as a group, we worked very diligently from September through November, early December to get the report in. The role of the Human Services Committee is to review and evaluate those agencies seeking financial support from the town of Brattleboro and recommend funding levels to the Brattleboro Representative Town Meeting. Human Services allocation in the town budget is a long-standing tradition in Brattleboro, which seeks to support those agencies that serve the most vulnerable residents. We seek to determine how town funding would assist each agency. We considered the size of the agency's fund balance relative to their operational expenses, fundraising capacity, and the flexibility and predictability of other sources of funding, as well as the agency's positive impact on Brattleboro residents. The committee may ask for applications in any given year that focus on specific community issues of note, including but not limited to food insecurity, homelessness, disability support, substance abuse and prevention, elder, child, and adolescent health and well-being, BIPOC and LGBTQ support and safety, and other services that address thriving needs. The committee began meeting in September 2021 to review and update the application form before emailing all prior year's applications and posting the application on the town website. Additionally, the committee sponsored an informational meeting where the agencies and the public were invited to ask questions and seek clarification of the process. The committee met 8 times between September and December 2021. Each meeting was attended by a member of the Brattleboro Finance Committee and open to the public. This year, there were 4 new applications for funding, bringing the total number to 37 agencies. That total continues the trend of both an increase in agencies and requests for money. The committee uses a rubric scoring system where all 6 members of the committee read and score each application. In this case, the total number of pages to be read was 685. Those scores were obtained by assigning each application a score range of 0 to 5, 0, which is they did not at all meet the requirement, or through 5 of being fully and completely with supporting information in meeting all requirements. And scores were provided in 3 sections. One was how service was provided to the residents of Brattleboro, including consideration of service utilization data from the last fiscal year and/or data that represents a need for service in fiscal year 23. B, it is demonstrated that Brattleboro residents are better off because of the services they receive from the program or organization. And C, the strength of the organization regarding fiscal management and an illustrated need for additional program organizational funding from the town. So each one of those was scored between 0, and 5. Scoring is done individually by each committee member, and the results are only shared with other committee members at a meeting where variations in individual scores are reviewed. Committee members with a conflict of interest, for example, those that have served on the board or staff of an organization within 1 year, recuse themselves from discussing or rating the organization in conflict. Results almost always show a consistency within a narrow range that reveals consensus among committee members. This numeric rating of 0 to 15 generates an average score that enables the committee members to address funding cuts in a transparent, fair, and equitable manner. In 2021, the town meeting established a budget for human services funding as 1.4% of the previous year's budget. This year, the request for funding of the agency was $364,800, or approximately $88,500 more than authorized by the town meeting. To address this, the committee recommends that fully funding applications that have scored an average of 12 or above, 50% funding for applications that scored an average of 12, 25% funding for applications that scored under an average of 10, and we recommended no funding for applications that received an average below 8, average score of 8 or below. There was also a final adjustment of $725 made to the Boys and Girls Club to reconcile to the allotted budget amount of 1.4%. So the committee is unanimously recommends that the Brattleboro representative town meeting of 2022 approve allocating $275,575 in the federal year 23 budget to the following 34 agencies. I won't read the allocation to each agency, but it is provided and will be provided. It has been provided to the town, but also be included in the report to the RTM.
Well, David, thank you very much. And Anne, I'm a big admirer of your dedication and service and also your work product. And so I thank you. And then why don't we hear from the board as to what they want to do? Our charge is to whether or not to accept the human service recommendations. So Start with Jessica. Do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Oh, I have a question as a newbie, and then I just want to absolutely voice my support and admiration for the thorough job that you guys did. It must have been a really hard task, dividing up the money between all those organizations, all very worthy. So my question is the Human Services Committee a committee of RTM?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So does that, other than saying, yes, we'll send your recommendations along to the RTM for a vote, there's not a lot that we have to weigh in on.
That's
this.
correct.
That hasn't stopped us in the past, but I strongly discourage board members to weigh into.
All right. I just wanted to make sure I understood how
Yes,
It is
how
an
this
RTM.
structure works.
yes. That, all RTM committee members' work has to come through us to be put on as a motion for RTM.
Absolutely. Well, I'm fully in support of it.
Great. Tim, do you have a comment?
Just to thank you both for coming before us and presenting it in a very clear and concise way. And again, it was a perfect question because I really don't think that we need to add much because a lot of, some great work was done here. I understand the way you presented it. Thank you. I understand how you came to your decisions. I had one suggestion, which you could just nod at me and I'd be perfectly happy. I can also make this suggestion at RTM, but I just thought I'd throw it out there for the committee, just as a little feedback. And that is, I loved your A, B, and C because they are very good ways to score, I think. I did come up with one more that I thought might be interesting and provocative to consider along the way, and it might even be part of C. But my idea was to have an additional rubric that just how well is the organization supported by other funders, either public or private, to evaluate the need for the town taxpayers to support that organization. I say that just because I think there's a complex world when you're seeking funding for these types of organizations. And I think it's important to weigh that a little bit. Just a suggestion that along the way, it's important to understand what the burden is on town taxpayers and how much of that could be taken up by other agencies. And that might be a consideration in the future. And you may indeed have that as part of your considerations on that. You just didn't list it, whatever. But I just wanted to throw that out there that I think that's an important thing to consider along the way.
Tim, you're getting your nods.
Great, I'm happy. Thank you. You feel free to comment if you want, but you're not asked to comment. Thanks.
All right.
Tim, this is Dave Minor. I would say that in fact, what you've defined is when it does fall into C.
Yeah.
And,
I thought so.
we do, that is an important consideration that we do take a look at other funding vehicles for the organization.
Great. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian, do you have a comment?
I think I appreciate Jess, you sort of lining this up for, this is basically our role is to accept this, to send it off to RTM. I want to just take 1 second and actually I want to just thank you both so much for the presentation and the due diligence that you put into presenting this to the select board and then to RTM. I want to take this moment because I received some criticism from the community about funding human services, just generally. And I just wanted to take a moment just to reflect on the fact that this is a statutory right that a municipality has under 24 VSA 2691 that allows for municipalities to fund human services that provide for a variety of different people in the community so that the town doesn't have to do it. And that is like basically the the real like meat of what this is for. We support community services so that they can do the job and that they can provide for community members, and that the municipality doesn't have to spend so much more money taking it under our own umbrella. And so when you kind of understand that balance, the amount of money that we devote from our budget to that is it's the right amount, and it's really it's a good thing that we can do, and I just am fully in support of it. And so I want to just take a moment to sort of say that from just some community feedback that I received.
Thank you. Daniel, do you have a comment?
Let's see, I do accept the human services recommendations, and I look forward to discussing at RTM.
Yeah.
Great.
Where I will be both a select board member and an RTM member.
Right. So how about a motion?
I'm gonna go last.
I'll do
All
it.
right. Jess?
I move that we accept the human services recommendations.
Great. All select board members in favor of accepting the human services recommendations, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Oh,
Aye.
Wait,
what?
Oh, somebody was giving us a.
we didn't do any public comment.
Oh.
Oh. All right, let's take that vote back.
Okay. Would you like to hear from Catherine Harlan?
Sure. Catherine, please join us.
Hello, everybody. And I just really want to thank everybody who contributed and all the committee members. It seems like you really did a lot of work on this, and I appreciate that. I'm a little bit new to this process too, so please bear with me a minute. My interest is really in taking a look at how our budget overall is matching up with the recommendations that were in the community safety report. And I have got two things that I wanted to bring up. And the first one, I admit, like, I know this is out of order. Please excuse me. I just, the police budget went up pretty substantially, and there may be some very good reasons for that. But the community safety report recommends level funding the police. And I would just like to know how I get some additional information about how, what some of the specifics are of the changes in the police budget. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I just would like to know how to get more information on that. But the thing that's more
I can answer that question. The question was the increase is almost entirely salaries. That was discussed in a select board meeting in November, and
Yes.
you can hear that again. And I also want to note that at the same time that the salary was increased, the select board also chose to establish the community safety fund to fund future alternatives to policing. Now you had another question.
I do recognize that. I was aware of those things, but thank you for pointing that out. I just had a couple of detailed questions about the police budget. So I was just wondering where I could ask those questions. That was.
Well, you could ask them at our next meeting, next Tuesday, when we're discussing the budget. You could call the town and discuss it with the town manager or the assistant town manager.
Okay.
Or you could, review the police budget presentation that was made, when was it, November?
End of November.
End of November, I would have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Hold on a second, Daniel.
Or if you're not already a town meeting member, become a town meeting member by taking a petition out, get 10 signatures from your fellow district mates, and then be at town meeting and vote on the budget. And at the time when we're voting on the budget, there will be an opportunity for discussion, but also action. We are likely to continue down the road of adopting this budget as it stands after these additions tonight. And then town meeting will decide. And so if you are not in the room on that day, you don't have as much power as you could have.
But again, if, most of your questions, I'm assuming, can be answered if you review the meeting where it was discussed, it's not on tonight's agenda, so it's not appropriate to discuss it at this time. Because
I
right
understand.
now, as you know, we're talking about the human service budget.
Right, I understand that. Thank you. So my question for that is more relevant, apologies for that little digression, is that on the community safety implementation table that Peter Elwell put together, 13 recommendations 13 through 17 talk about basically things how that we should be reinvesting some of our money, and some of that seems like it's relevant to this discussion here. So I'm just going to try to quickly summarize this because I don't want to waste a lot of time here. One is number 13 is safe housing, food shelves, free meals, community gardens. Number 14 is new and is mutual aid support, BIPOC run organizations providing voluntary support, etc. 15 is voluntary and non-coercive support. I'm sorry, I have to expand my view here. Run by communities they are designed to support. 16 is community-sponsored mutual aid. And 17 is restorative justice. Invest in restorative justice practices at all levels, especially at the neighborhood level. And so I'm just wondering how the human services budget that's being proposed fits in with these priorities. And for example, one thing I noticed is that in terms of restorative justice, it looks like the Brattleboro Justice Community Justice Center, it's basically the allocation is going from like $6,000 to $7,500 or something like that. So I'm just wondering how we see what's being recommended in the human services budget in the context of these priorities. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much.
All right, there's a number of people who would like to respond, but let me just start us off by saying that human service requests are organization specific. They come from the bottom up, from the community agencies themselves. So what you're asking is, does the community service report from the top down dictate the spending? That's not how it works. So
I'm not actually suggesting that. Maybe I misunderstood something. Were the agencies allocated everything that they requested? I assume that the whole process of going through this was, and the process that David described is about how the priorities were set up. And my question is, are the priorities laid out in the community safety report? Were those considered also?
That's a good committee.
that's a good question.
Okay.
But again, here's other comments.
I want to give, I guess, before the committee is interrogated on this question, I really want to it's kind of a interesting sort of government question that is kind of fun to think about. So the community safety review report and recommendations, in part with Peter's chart that you referenced, was adopted by the Selectboard, and that as a policy decision. The RTM Human Services Committee is an RTM committee. The Selectboard adopting a policy decision, and then RTM subcommittee looking at what they're doing with human services funding. I don't think it's quite as simple as saying, did they follow the community safety report and that we approved, because they're under kind of a separate umbrella. So I think when this question actually should be presented at RTM, and the question being, do we feel like we want to also follow within the community safety report that the select board considered, and whether the human services allocations reflect that. But I don't know if it's actually fair to put that to the committee right now I mean, I would be willing to entertain listening to their response if they want to, but, you know, that was our decision. And they are a RTM community, RTM group. So there is a distinction there that I think is really important to make.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think that we have to understand that those recommendations and action on them is something that we were advised to, you know, take slowly and look at the big picture and also work with the community. You know, we set aside funding for volunteer community agencies to provide answers and alternatives to policing consistent with that report. Dana, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something very direct in response to a point you raised about the Community Justice Center. So the Brattleboro Community Justice Center merged with Youth Services. And so when you see the Youth Services line on there, previous request was 12,000, previous grant was 12,000. This time they requested 21,500 and they were granted, or at least it's, the committee's recommendation is that they'll be granted that amount. Whether the town meeting approves it, we'll see. So just wanted to kind of point that out. And I think the kind of bigger question of does the Human Services Review Committee's work this year also, I don't know, fit with recommendations from the Community Safety Review? I mean, I know at least one person who was on the committee was heavily involved in the Community Safety Review. Two people, actually. I'm sure that they brought those perspectives in there. And I think the question really is for the committee to answer.
But at the same time, you know,
and it was not their charge.
Yeah, it was not their charge. Yeah. And I don't feel that they need to be interrogated after the diligent work that they've done.
I just want to say I wasn't trying to interrogate anybody.
It's just a
chat. I didn't mean to.
It's a term they use. Ask a question.
All right. I didn't mean it in a negative connotation at all.
So therefore, I would consider this discussion closed. Are there other members of the public who would like to speak?
No.
All right. Thank you for your commentary. Thank you for this discussion.
Can I just make
yes,
one
Tim?
little
yes, please.
correction to something that Ian said? I loved everything you said. It was very accurate. I just want to point out that that rubric that you were referring to, the recommendations that we approved, more of a policy guidance document.
Okay, fair.
Not a policy document, because there has been some confusion about that as to where the power to make these changes lie.
I appreciate the clarification.
All right, let's go back to the motion that was made and that we were in mid-vote. Jessica.
Yes. I made a motion to accept the Human Services recommendation.
Great. Jessica made a motion to accept the Human Services recommendation. All select board members in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
5-0. Ann and David, thank you again very much for your.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Night.
Thanks for coming on that ride with us.
Right. What is next?
Break.
Break. 8 o'clock. It's about 5 after 8, and let's come back at 8:15. Thank you very much. Welcome back to the Select Board meeting of January 18th. We are on item D, new business, tax stabilization for alternative energy systems. We are considering a request made by Tom Mazakowski. Tom, are you here? Here you are.
Yes, I am.
Tell us all about it.
Okay, well, I know that you all want a little presentation because, you know, the public is listening and watching. But I will just start off by saying that the little summary that, you know, Patrick wrote in the administrative report is a really good, you know, summarizing rundown of it. I'll try to state what the memo says, but with a little extra info that maybe it doesn't include in it. This incentive that I'm proposing that that the town implement is it's enabled by a Vermont statute, and it gives towns the ability to waive to a certain degree of their choosing the property tax value of renewable energy plants. It's the same statute by which the town previously had implemented tax stabilization programs for commercial and industrial, as well as farmland properties. So you may be familiar with it, or if not, the town itself is. And so the way it works is that it has to be decided at the town meeting. And then the town meeting decides to give authority to the select board to enter into such contracts. And the select board can choose to develop a program. They have a degree of latitude. I don't know how much that is, but to decide the criteria and the terms of the program, and what property within that category of whether it's commercial, industrial, or farmland, or in this case renewable energy, is eligible. So just to be clear, the statute does it term rating plants. So that includes winds, hydro, I think geothermal and solar. But it seems like from what I've learned and heard from others, the way that it's pretty certain that renewable energy is going to be implemented here in this area going forward is largely through solar. So that's why in the memo the word solar is and photovoltaic is often in there. Yeah, so I don't know. I feel like I just want to leave it at that. And I mean, that wasn't the most clear-cut explanation of the memo, but I think the memo and the administrative report really summarize it well. And I just touched upon a couple points that aren't in there. So I just like to hear if you all understand it, what you think of it, and if you saw at the end that I brought this to 4 of the town's committees: the Ag Advisory Committee, the Conservation Commission, the Energy Committee, and the Planning Commission. And the proposal got, well, I'll say that there were statements of support that went along with the proposal that nearly in every case were supported unanimously. So yeah, I'll just stop there. My brain's kind of going in a few different directions, so I'll just stop there and I'll field questions and comments.
Okay, Tom, thank you. My initial thought is, I am loath to enter into, tax stabilization programs with anybody, but this is a valuable public purpose. So solar arrays could locate on a variety of lands, and you want to give this carrot to solar arrays and other renewable energy that choose brownfields or other classes of land that you've described as disturbed.
Yes, disturbed and already developed. Yep.
Yeah. So, but further, you would also like to if the RTM gives the authority to the select board, then the select board could also choose to develop a program that included already established alternative energy sites, like existing solar array groups. Is that your contention as well?
Yeah, I'll respond to that. I've definitely been aware of that concern, and I haven't changed the memo in a month and a half now, and I've heard some of those concerns since, but I was getting statements of support voted on by the committees, and I didn't want to keep changing the memo. As you'll see in the memo under the third intent, that to me is the crux of the point of this. it says, what I wrote is to reduce the municipal tax portion of new photovoltaic arrays sited on already developed or disturbed sites, such that these arrays that otherwise would not have been built or otherwise would have been built on green fields, meaning fields and forests, are incentivized to more likely be built on already developed or disturbed sites. So, thinking back, I added the word existing partially, in other parts of the memo because, I wasn't, there's two reasons. For one, I wasn't too sure how these programs, how applicants, apply to them and how they work. So I thought, maybe if someone develops a plant, on a rooftop, but they, are kind of banking on this stabilization, and they don't quite meet the deadline, then maybe they technically be considered existing. And then so that's one facet. And then the other is I thought, well, just because a plant is already developed, but it was done so on a way, that aligns with the values of this memo and our town plan, and et cetera, maybe they should be kind of retroactively rewarded. But, I'm looking back at it, the sole intent of this is to move forward, making it easier and for, solar and other renewable to be done in ways that align with our town plan and goals, compact development, preserving field and forest and farmland. So yeah, rewarding, and giving tax stabilization reductions to what already exists. Ooh, I don't know if y'all are seeing that. To what already exists is not aligned with this. And
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do other select board members have questions?
Community interest.
Yes, I guess I do. It's more a clarifying question, really. So the statute from which, the power to do these tax stabilization agreement comes says that we may do them for contracts related to agricultural or forest property, open space land, or to alternate energy generating plants, or by a vote of 2/3 of those present, blah, 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 for a contract relating to commercial or industrial property. So we already enter into payment in lieu of taxes agreements with commercial or industrial properties, correct?
So, the town has existing tax stabilization agreements. The pilot agreements that we have, for example, with like the Brattleboro retreat, we're at a decided disadvantage in that we cannot define unilaterally how much an entity could pay for a pilot. But these tax stabilization agreements, at least the way in which they work in the commercial and industrial development. Let's say, for example, I've got $1 million manufacturing plant, and I'm trying to double it and hire new people, and we're going to produce more widgets. The town, under the program that has been developed for this and approved and adopted by the select board, the town would tax normally the already existing portion of the building, but the new portion might, for example, be phased in slowly over time, such that you're giving an incentive to grow. And even in year one, the grand list is growing and the revenues coming into the town are growing. But you've helped to give an incentive to someone to grow their business. So I guess my question really is, town meeting has already in the past given the board the authority to enter into agreements with commercial or industrial properties and with agricultural or forest properties. What about the open space land? Is that something we've? So in the research that Bob Fisher and I did, we found 2 citations where RTM has granted authority to the select board. They were both in the early 1960s. I think one was 1960, the other was 1962. And one was was limited specifically for farmland stabilization, and the other was for commercial and industrial development. And none were warned for alternative energy generating plants. I just suspect the statute didn't
Right. They probably
exist
didn't
at that
say it.
time.
Yeah. Okay.
There
So
wasn't
then,
such a thing.
right. So just to kind of complete my thoughts. So it seems to me to be fairly reasonable, given how kind of clear this statute is and what powers it grants, that we do add this article to the warning, that we let town meeting figure out whether they want to do it or not. And then if it gets approved, then develop policy and a program for implementing it in the event that an entity asks for such a new thing.
Right.
And at that time, the board will make a decision, yea or nay, based on the merits of the thing.
Right, and on a case-by-case basis.
Yes, absolutely.
And as a whole, as a program that would be established, A, and B, on a case-by-case basis for each applicant or citing decision. Right?
Is that correct?
I think that's the only way this would proceed. This, I believe what Mr. Mozkowski is asking for is for you to put an article on the warning, to have town meeting grant the select board this general authority. And then, once granted, you could ask staff to contemplate and bring back a proposal for a program. And then future select boards would be able to decide whether or not, a given applicant is worthy of any sort of a agreement or incentive.
All right, let's see what everybody else thinks. Ian?
Yeah, it's giving the select board another tool, and we can not put the cart before the horse here and move forward with getting the tool, and then in the future discuss the actual details of how to implement it. But as far as the general authority for tax stabilization agreements for alternative energy generating plants, I think that makes a lot of sense, and probably the town would have already had this had the statute entertained it back in the 60s. Right. So yeah, I think it's a pretty straightforward thing.
What does this table think?
Sure. I think with the work that Tom's put in, and the support that he received from the Conservation Commission, the Agriculture Advisory Committee, the Energy Committee, and most of the Planning Commission, I think it's a really good reflection that he's done his homework and folks are on board with this idea, and we should send it along to RTM to get the town's input.
Tim?
I don't think I'm opposed, but I'm still a little bit stuck on, don't we already have this ability to do this?
I don't think we do for this type of land use.
Really?
And so that's the distinction here.
Okay, so we're not tying the potential town meeting warning article to number 2 at all, because the way it's arranged on our note, I just want to draw a
Number
distinction
two,
there.
what do you mean by number 2?
That's the program. So that would be after the fact, once we actually.
Right, right. But we're not necessarily putting our.
Have you looked at the proposed language for article?
Yeah, correct.
That's number 1.
Correct. I just want to make sure, because I don't really get the why of number 2, and Tom has his hand up, so.
Sure. Well, yeah, two parts to that. My intent originally was to combine those two into one and have an article on the RTM warning that says, for the RTM to consider and vote to grant the select board the authority, and not just on alternate energy, but on alternate energy plants that are already developed and disturbed. I wanted something like that on the article. And obviously I couldn't spell out, the whole memo in an article and all the rationale and everything, but I wanted some statement there that shows the kind of judicious selectiveness of it to already developed and disturbed. But in meeting with Patrick and our town attorney Bob Fisher, he advised that the article needs to just have the wording that you see before you. he said maybe the moderator will entertain, an amendment to, to give some binding wording as to criteria for the plants. But he didn't recommend adding that to the original article. If we could add it to the original article, I'd love to. And your second ask was about the why. And I think I wrote it there in the rationale down below in the memo, which is that, to meet our town energy goals, the county goals, the state goals, we need more renewable energy. And it seems like that's mostly going to happen through solar. The way that it's happening now is that it's cheapest, it's easiest, most profitable, however you want to look at it, for solar to be located on fields and forests. But yet we have these town plan and other goals to preserve those locations, as well as to do development in a compact way that's already on developed locations. So this incentive makes it a little easier for some renewable energy to happen, but it's that renewable energy that is more aligned with our development goals.
I see that. I guess my the reason I got tripped up on that second part is that when I think of the large PV arrays within the town of Brattleboro, one is a huge array. Actually, it's one of the largest in the state, built on a former landfill.
Sure.
And the other is right by 91, which is not really prime building or any kind of pleasant land to develop or to preserve. So I'm just wondering if this is sort of a solution in search of a problem for Brattleboro specifically, or are you projecting into the future that that's been a problem elsewhere in the state and could be a problem here?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's a little bit of both. We have 6 sites that are currently taxed, and if this tax stabilization program was to be applied broadly to everything it could apply to, it would apply to those 6. 5 of them are on field and forest. I think you're right. I think you nailed. You pinpointed the 2 largest ones over the landfill and over by the vitamin, factory. I'm pretty sure it was that one though, actually, that someone from the Ag Advisory Committee was saying, was disappointed in that existing there, because I think they were saying that was ag land. I'm pretty sure they started bringing it up at first, and I thought, oh, they're talking about the one down on on the way to Fort Dummer, but then no, they brought up the whatever the name of the vitamin business is there, and next to the interstate.
New chapter.
So, yeah.
New chapter.
Yeah, new chapter.
Tom,
And then also projecting forward, it seems like this is the way it's going to go. Field and forest is the easiest locations.
Okay, I guess my point was, I'm glad it's 2 separate things, because I don't think the mixing in the second step would be that successful at RTM, but it's just my opinion. So I'm not going to stand in the way of the article as presented.
Tom, I have a couple more questions.
Sure.
The Wyndham Regional Commission prepared a study. I believe they got a considerable amount of money to study sites suitable for alternative energy in Wyndham County, and identified a considerable number of sites in Brattleboro. And so if a developer were to come in and develop on one of those sites, they wouldn't be prohibited if it didn't qualify with this as land. They just wouldn't be able to have this amenity. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat maybe the last couple sentences? I guess it's my connection.
Sure. So anyway, Wyndham Regional Commission had this whole big study for Wyndham County, and they identified a solar applicable sites. You're familiar with that report?
I'm not familiar with the report. I'm familiar with the map that they have. That is just kind of it shows
Well, there's
prime
a
and secondary
report
sites.
that goes with the map.
Okay.
So anyway, that study took place, and there are a variety of sites that kind of independent of the Planning Commission, the Wyndham Regional Commission has identified. And then there's most likely land use law zoning for Brattleboro that would allow solar arrays in locations that are not included within the sites that you're preferring. So nothing would stop them from locating there. They just would not be eligible for the incentives that you're talking about here.
Just one note, it's how the select board would ultimately determine the program. If the select board chose to make it broad for everything, they could, just like they could make it specific to certain projects. I think that's a later determination. I think what we've discussed here is that this is to create a tool that we could ultimately create the rules. And exactly what you're saying, that, if his initial intent was to keep it for just Brownfield, that is how the select board could do it.
Right. All right, people. How do we feel? Are we ready for a motion? Are there public who wish to chime in?
No hands raised.
No hands raised. All right. Would someone like to make a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion. I move that we place on the 2022 RTM warning the article to see if the town will authorize and provide general authority to the select board to enter into tax stabilization agreements with owners, lessees, bailees, and operators of alternate energy generating plants for the purpose of fixing and maintaining the valuation of such property in the grand list.
All right. Jessica has made a motion to place on the 2022 RTM warning the article to see if the town will authorize and provide general authority to the select board to enter into tax stabilization agreements with owners, lessees, baileys, and operators of alternative energy generating plants for the purpose of fixing and maintaining the valuation of such property in the grand list. All the select board members in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, thank you for your consideration and your vote.
All right. Financial report. Let's see. Yoshi, are you discussing this or is it Patrick?
Patrick.
Okay.
Yes, good evening. The financial statements through December have been included in the board packet. Not a whole lot to say. We're about 6 months through the way through the year, about halfway. Expenditures in the general fund are at 51.8% of the annual budget. I think this is something John O'Connor used to say, after we take certain expenses and sort of break those out on a month-by-month basis, we're actually 48.2% of the annual budget. The utility funds are at 48% and 41% in the parking fund. If there are any questions, I know Yoshi and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there were any specific questions about the financial statements.
I think this is here because Tim wants it here. So let's ask Tim if he has any comments.
Yeah. No, I actually poured over it and it looks pretty straightforward. It's always an interesting exercise to go over these numbers and kind of try to figure it out for yourself before making that phone call to staff, which I'm sure is appreciated. I just want to point out to everybody that because there's been a lot of discussion, as there should be, about meals, alcohol in rooms and sales tax, and that's coming in low because only one quarter has been reported so far. right? So, can I take this moment to make a suggestion? And I think I've made this suggestion in the past. It would be really helpful if we could just, on the front page, we always get a reminder that this is 50% of the fiscal year completed, or 53.2. If we could have that on the pages, it would just be super helpful. I don't know, just an extra reminder at the top.
I'll certainly take a look at that. I can tell you that our,
Yeah, but to say that this is a software program, yeah,
archaic, but,
we could write it in.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you can
I
do
tell you
the
what,
page,
Tim,
it
you
might
could
be
rip out this page and take it with you as you turn the other pages.
But then it's,
I'll tell you what I do. I hold the number 50 in my head.
I
and I
know.
go down each one. I'm like, is this close to 50? Yes, good. Is this not? Oh, what's going on here?
Okay, yeah. Well, maybe that's what happened when I brought it up last time. I was mocked mercilessly, I should say.
Okay, it was merciful.
We'll be merciful.
We have lots of mercy.
No, I have no questions. It is a point of, I think it should not be on consent agenda.
Yeah.
All right.
It's not on the consent
No,
agenda.
that was the discussion. That's why I'm being called out by our chair. Yeah.
I think it's good that it's here, and I know that each month when we get it, we do review it, and it's good to provide space for discussion of items of note. Thankfully, there are almost no items of note. I do note that the parking meter revenue seems to be bouncing back okay, and I'm also wondering, and I know that this is not really parking budget season, but we adjusted the parking budget meter revenue down post-COVID, oh my God. After the big COVID drop, in the last time we did the parking budget, we sort of readjusted that. I'm surprised by where it's at. It's a Patrick question, I feel like. Given that you're the master of all on parking. I actually have a
your
fund
question
in there as well,
being
$10.
that it's surprisingly high or surprisingly low?
No, I think it looks healthy. And I'm just wanting to remind myself of how the budget line for parking meter revenue got adjusted in the last cycle, because.
Yep. So I honestly, I cannot recall what that number was the previous year. I do recall that we did a little bit of a downturn, and I absolutely recall that the previous year, the fund absolutely bombed. And so there was a very healthy loss in that extended. It was primarily in 2020 and then a little bit in 2021. We do seem to be rebounding, and there's activity downtown in ways that feels and appears more normal. And that appears to be what's going on in terms of the parking meter revenue.
Great. Very good.
Great. Ian?
I have a motion, if the chair will entertain it.
I certainly will.
I move to accept the monthly financial report as presented.
Ian has made a motion to approve the monthly financial report as presented. All select board members in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Hi.
Unanimous, 5-0. Thank you. All right, now we are on to town meeting election on March 1st and representative town meeting on March 19th and/or 20th, and 20th if needs be. And we're reviewing the draft warnings. So let's turn to tab F. Patrick, would you like to introduce this?
I'd be happy to. The draft warning, which is before you this evening, is something that will need to be approved by the board next week, because that falls into that period of time where no less than 30, no more than 40 days ahead of representative town meeting. I can tell you that this particular document is the product of the work of many town staff and the town attorney. Peter Elwell had a hand in this. Jessica Stickler had a hand in this. Hillary Francis had a hand in this. Yoshi Manali's had a hand in this. And so Attorney Bob Fisher has had two hands in this. And I can tell you that we're feeling pretty good about this. The first page is the annual town meeting warning, which is just the one article. And these numbers for members in the various districts are current. The second page begins the warning for representative town meeting. Each of the articles on that page from 1 to 8 are all exactly as they have been in previous years. These are the town auditor's report to engage a CPA and so on. I think these are pretty standard articles. We get into some new material on the top of the second page. Article 9 is to appoint members to the RTM steering committee. Article 10 is to appoint members to the library board of trustees. 11 is another procedural one to empower the select board to borrow money in anticipation of taxes. Article 12, as you'll recall, is to determine the compensation for the select board. This has been an interesting one lately. Article 13, this will be the blank will now read 300,000, we now know. And so that'll be adjusted by the time you see it next week. Article 14 is the specific sum for the community marketing initiative. Article 15 is, what do we got here?
Downtown.
The $80,000 for the downtown, for the DBA. Article 19 or 16, excuse me. This is one which has been on the RTM warning for many, many years, but has been at an entirely different number. And you'll recall that the select board worked with the state of Vermont perhaps about 8 months ago to refinance the debt that Tri-Park has through the town with the state. And so this number has dropped from where it was previously up around 230,000. It's now down around 130,000, which is going to provide a good bit of cash flow for that organization to be able to deal with all the challenges that they have.
And I believe they're 8% of the Brattleboro population.
That is my understanding. So that'll be good news for the folks at Tri-Park. Article 17, you know, is what was presented to you this evening by Human Services. Article 18 is to see what amount or percentage we will include in next year's budget for Human Services. Article 19 is the RTM Steering Committee article on lunch. Article 20 is the budget. Article 21 is SEVIDS funding coming out of the town's revolving loan fund and program income. Article 22 is to accept the report from the RTM Steering Committee. Article 24, this relates, of course, to the sale of the property, the Brattleboro Museum, to the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center. So this is the old train station property that needs authorization by representative town meeting in order to proceed with that transaction. Article 25 is the change, you'll recall, to the agricultural land to be able to support some of those small time investments in sort of farm to plate initiatives. Article 26 is the one you just discussed just now with Tom Wozakowski. And then Article 27 is effectively other business. I'll just let you know that Attorney Fisher's in the meeting if you'd like to speak to him about any of these particulars.
Well, thank you, Patrick. It all seems in order. I don't have any questions except, you know, there are some things that we haven't seen yet. Will we see them before next week when are we voting on this next week? So things like the RTM report and things like that, will they be available for us to review before next week? Or
I'm sorry, will what be available?
Article 22, there's a report from RTM and we haven't seen that yet.
Okay.
Will we see that before next week when we vote?
Staff received it just today. I'd be happy to circulate it.
Great. All right, go ahead, Daniel.
Building on that, what would it mean to act on this report that the RTM steering committee has just delivered to you? What are the implications?
We could ask Attorney Fisher, but I suspect his answer is going to be very much like the manner in which you accepted the Human Services Committee. Thank you for your work.
Okay, got it.
And doing so, transferring it to the body of RTM to discuss. Okay, Ian?
First, just the numbering error.
Wow, where?
21,
yeah.
22, 24, 20.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Oh, it's like 20, yeah. We do not speak of Article 23. That is the secret article.
Remember that
It's hidden
time?
somewhere in the room.
Back in Art 1?
There was a 23 and we took it out and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then a more substantive question to Patrick is, and this is more for my memory. So we spent a lot of time last year talking about what is now Article 18. So I just want to be clear, is this basically a copy and paste of the article from last year? Because it was very successful the way that we worded it last year. And we were arguing about whether to have percentile amount and giving RTM, and I don't actually remember where we landed.
Allow me to ask Bob to come on in because
Yeah.
he has a very specific answer about
Oh,
this.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, let me see if I can find him.
The meetings just aren't as fun unless Bob comes in. Hi, Bob.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes?
Yep.
Okay. With regard to last year, I'll look at the minutes, but I thought we landed on a percentage, right?
Yeah.
I just don't have those right at my fingertips, but the number that came up with the Human Services Committee, that amount that's in there is the amount that was from last year's representative town meeting.
Well, yes, that's for the the one ahead of it. The
Oh, sorry.
subsequent One is how we will fix upon a new number for the upcoming year.
Oh, well, that's,
Yeah, I'm looking at Article 18. So the question about what the next year's total is going to be. And like last year, we just spent a lot of time talking about how best to word this article to allow RTM to have a fruitful conversation about that number. And I just don't recall how we landed on it. And if this is just the same article exactly, then that's great. I just don't remember.
I think last year we fixed upon a percentage and brought that percentage to the board.
Oh, we did. It was like,
It was 1.4.
I thought it was less and they went up again.
Yeah.
I think we,
So
yeah.
1.4 was where representative town meeting landed and gave direction to the board. But if I can ask you, Bob, you have said, to my recollection, several times that by using the wording of specific amount, that provides flexibility to the body to either choose a dollar amount or a percentage. Am I correct on that?
that is correct, Patrick. And last year, my recollection is that there had been an amendment up to like 2% and it came back down to 1.4. And that's how the motion was made. And that's where ultimately representative town meeting landed. But with regard to the wording, that's why we've worded it that way, so that at least there can be that discussion at representative town meeting.
So I'm still just a little confused because I thought last year in the motion, the 1.4 was presented. Because I think that among us on the select board, we liked that number. I just,
1.4. I don't recall either.
can you look that up,
Of
Patrick?
course.
Maybe we can discuss it again.
Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate, Bob, thank you very much for that answer. I think you've answered my big question, which was, are we giving enough flexibility? And so the language of specific amount could go percentage or amount, and that sort of answers it, so.
Great. Do other people have comments to make on these articles?
Can anybody just remind me when we had the conversation about Zoom versus in person? Did we have that conversation?
No, we haven't.
I think that we were planning on saving that for tomorrow, next week.
Oh, really?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think the governor has to sign the bill first and then we can have a discussion.
I think he did sign it.
Did he?
He did sign it. Just since I saw it here, I just want to make sure that we were actually gonna.
That's an excellent point, Tim. And frankly, I probably should have opened with that. The warning before you that you're, reviewing and considering right now presumes a virtual representative town meeting rather than a hybrid. You're absolutely right. The bill that Senate 172 has been passed and signed into law by the governor. We have the authority now to conduct representative town meeting and the informational meetings and the district caucuses all virtually. And so the warning that's presented to you it contemplates that as the manner in which we would conduct ourselves.
Which is the most likely.
Right.
But I just want to make sure at some point we would have that space.
Next week.
Next week.
Last time we had that space, right?
Which would be the most up to date.
Yeah.
It would? Yeah.
It's tough to imagine next week would be like, in person. No masks.
I know. The problem is, of course, with the timing, it's March 19th.
Yeah.
It may be a very different world.
Yeah, I hope so.
We all hope so.
God willing. Dana, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just wanted to implore all the hundreds and hundreds of people who are watching and reading about this, that if they still wanted to run to be a town meeting member, there is still time. And it is very healthy for us to have contested elections. I do not believe, based on my conversation with the town clerk last week, that we are likely to have contested elections for town meeting. Is maybe dependent on a couple of people. So even just having 3 or 4 additional people run for each district would be impactful. And all you've got to do is get 10 signatures from your fellow district mates and turn them into the town clerk's office by Monday at 5 p.m. Not so hard.
Piece of cake.
Piece of cake.
All right then. Let me check my notes. No action is required on this item. Does anyone have any further comments so that we can give staff to be set for next week's?
So we will discuss whether or not it will be Zoom or in person
Next week.
next week.
Yes.
I will definitely take into consideration and bring back a warning with the numbering correct. Our plan at the moment would be to bring back a warning similar to this one that contemplates a virtual meeting.
Okay.
I guess just to be real clear, so were we next week to decide that we would like it to be in person, do we need to have an alternative draft warning that shows?
We'll have both.
Yeah.
We'll have both ready, prepared in case, because again, you're not making a decision until next week. So we can, the language is fairly standard. So we'll just be able to have both on just in case.
There've been a number of in-person meetings, so I'm sure they can use them as an example.
Yeah.
They haven't always been on Zoom.
Sure, I think they have.
Maybe they have, it's a long time.
All right, are we settled on this matter for the time being? Yes. All right, now we are adding a discussion of the mask mandate
Yes.
that was pulled from the consent agenda.
That's the only reason we haven't lost Chris.
I'm sorry. What?
I made a joke that might be why Chris is sticking around.
Yeah, like, I got a call today from TV reporter. Okay, mask mandate renewal. I told him nothing to see here, but
I'm just waiting for my chair to hand me the talking stick. Yeah, you want me to?
Mr. Wessel.
Okay, thank you for your patience, everyone. I asked to have this pulled mainly because, as you know, I was not in favor of the original rule. I'm going to try to avoid using mandate because we call it a rule. But I guess it's interchangeable. That's what everybody perceives it as. And certainly respectful of the board's decision after it was made and voted for the very good modifications that we made for it. However, when I took a quick look at our rule, it's problematic even now more than it was before in my mind, because we have effectively transitioned into ordering people to wear masks that are of a style which science now tells us are largely ineffective against Omicron variant. So if our intent is to protect with this rule and not just create some sort of magical thinking of safety, then I wanted to just throw that out there as a friendly idea. Shouldn't we be modifying this rule, or at least recommending? I think one easier, and just to be clear for everybody watching and listening, we say in this wearing of face coverings required that the public, towards the end, shall require both staff and customers or visitors to wear cloth face coverings or face shields. By the way, face shields are so 2020. I don't think anybody does those anymore. But cloth face coverings really don't protect very well against the Omicron variant. And evidence of this is easy to find. Our own State Department of Health has put out very clear guidance as to sort of the scale of effectiveness of preventing transmission and reception is at the very bottom, cloth masks, and then surgical masks, and then N94, KN94, like I'm wearing, like we're all wearing, by the way, up here on the select board, either surgical or KN95s, and then the highest would be 95s, which I think our chair might be wearing.
I am, as a matter of fact. The
So-
K just signifies that it was made in Korea, by the way.
Correct. I should have said KN94, I believe, is the one that I'm wearing. But anyway, I couldn't not mention this problem with our rule.
Well, you want to just take out the word cloth, call it a day?
I just wanted to open it up for discussion and say maybe it's just a matter of tacking a recommendation, because I do want to be cognizant that not everybody has access to all masks. Some businesses have actually chosen, and Municipal Center as an example, when you walk in the door, you see a stack of surgicals, and the surgicals do a much better job, as we've learned now, than cloth. So that's a fairly inexpensive option for businesses if they wanted to provide for that. But right now it's just sort of anything. And the science has kind of come around to validate those people who were complaining that cloths don't do much. It turns out that in the Omicron land, they're right.
Let's hear from Daniel.
Thanks. I appreciate what you're saying, and I think what you're trying to communicate to the public is things have shifted, and adjust your mask accordingly if you can, right? It's not so much like you must, but please know that during this particular moment, a higher standard of mask will protect you more, and you should not have an illusion of safety with a cloth mask, right?
Although, I just want to say that I was opposed to the original rule because it is a you must
Right.
versus what I was,
It is a
Push it.
what?
a you must.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So I was pushing, as you know, for our also passed resolution that
Right.
highly recommends vaccinations and
Right.
mask coverings.
So,
But
yeah, I think
Now we have a
we're
you
going to
must.
continue to require face coverings and would recommend wearing as good a face covering as you can afford and as you have available to you. I mean, I don't see the need to change the language, but I think talking about it right now is important. And I think the public should know that their mask that they used all last year ain't going to cut it. And many people do know, some people might not.
And the reason for that is that originally the masks were in such short supply that they were
Yes.
needed
Yes,
by
my God.
hospitals.
You were told, do not buy an
Yeah.
N95 mask.
Right. So I think it's kind of, it should be wending its way through informational channels. But I don't know. Ian, did you have a comment?
So I think for tonight, we don't really have before us amending this rule. This is whether we're approving it or not. So if we felt like we could amend it tonight based on what's warned, I would be in favor of amending it to incorporate the language that Tim is speaking about. I guess I would like to just address more, simply because it's coming from the board member who voted against it, that I do not see the fact that we have to continually modify this to reflect the reality on the ground as an inherent problem with what we've done. Like, this pandemic has constantly been shifting ground, and our federal government and the CDC is constantly changing the guidelines. Like, I had a close friend who got COVID, and he quarantined for 10 days. And on the 10th day, do you know what the CDC did? Change the quarantine to 5 days. Let me finish, please. So I really believe that while I appreciate the sentiment, or I appreciate what you're saying, because I agree, I don't agree with the sentiment that it is inherently negative or bad that our mandate is not always like entirely up to date and that it requires some modification. That's like what this pandemic has shown that we have to do when it comes to advising the public as to health matters.
Okay, totally. May I respond to that?
Sure.
I wasn't really going after that tact of it. What I was really moving us towards is that if we can't be so specific with a rule, my original point with my opposition to the mandate or the rule is that we were doing very well as a town, masking everywhere, with some exceptions, but largely by my eye in experiencing around town, people who have opposed wearing masks have continued to not wear masks. They've just stayed close to places that don't care. And the issue that I'm putting forward is if this document is not going to be an actual up-to-date, by the science health recommendation, why shouldn't it be just a proclamation of this is what we recommend currently in time and not a rule to tell people they must do this?
Okay, so Jessica, do you want to comment before?
I think it's all been said.
Okay, I just want to say that masks are necessary, and I think and the board has chosen to place this rule in effect to protect the public health and safety. And the reason that I believe it's necessary is because we're kind of getting a false sense of complacency with the governor's numbers about vaccinations. I mean, obviously, vaccinations are the solution to this problem. But the data that we generally hear is that 97% of the Vermont population has at least one dose. And at least one dose is a very misleading number. And it doesn't say that people are have had both shots. They've been boosted and they're up to speed with the timing of their immunity granted by the vaccination. So what do we do? What can we do legally as allowed by the governor is have this mask rule in place more than anything as a reminder that this pandemic is going on, and that, we may feel complacent, we may feel any number of things, but COVID doesn't feel any of those things. COVID is, in movie terms, like the Terminator. It can't be reasoned with, it can't be talked to. So in the meantime, I think we should continue with our mask mandate. If there's future language that we want to tweak, and the next time someone has a suggestion, we'll bring it up, but at this point, let's just let it stand.
I am a little tripped up by your point about the warning, because in the past, I think we did have language that said re-ratify, amend, or cancel or whatever, but on today's agenda, it simply says mask mandate renewal. So I don't know what the answer is to that. Yeah, I would just encourage my 4 fellow members who want to continue with a rule, not necessarily an encouragement or anything that I was pushing for, to strike cloth or anything that misleads the public into thinking they're protected by cloth, because that's not what we should be doing.
Ian?
So I'm in full favor of that. I mean, it could even be encouraged, or it should be, you need to wear a mask, and the town encourages citizens to wear masks that are recommended by the CDC. Like something as simple as that, to just, even using that language so that it shifts with the CDC's recommendations, because they could change again. I'm in favor of doing that right now if we feel like the warning is sufficient to allow for that. And if it's not, then I would also be in favor of simply putting this on the agenda for next Tuesday to modifying the now approved rule so that it reflects what Tim's bringing up. Either way, whatever is actually legal.
Yeah. Do we need to ask Bob?
He's here.
Well, let's ask.
Sure, Bob, sure. I don't know. I mean, yeah.
Hi there.
Hi, Bob.
Sorry.
Can we modify this rule now based upon our discussions, or does the warning kind of tie us into renewal or nothing?
Well, I think you can modify it, because when it was brought up to renew it, the subject matter of the mask rule, as Tim puts it, is up for discussion. So with regard to how you want to modify it, I leave that to your policy and your discretion. But as far as the topic of the ability to do that, I think it's adequately warned under the renewal.
Okay, thank you, Bob. So
Thank you, Bob.
Ian, you were just discussing adding the language as recommended by the CDC.
Yeah.
I wrote out something if you want to.
Yeah.
So to wear CDC recommended face coverings over their noses and mouths.
Yes.
Great.
That's perfect.
Okay,
And it
so,
might appear in a couple places, just,
Is it? Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
all right.
But I think we've made our feelings really clear to town staff and what we're trying to get across.
All right, so let's have a motion.
Can I ask for 2 motions?
Yes,
Oh, are you really? I disagree. We should not do two motions.
What do you mean two motions?
Oh,
Wait a minute.
Ian.
Wait a minute.
Let's hear what Tim has to say.
Wait,
We should modify what we currently have, and then we should vote as the governor demanded, that we should reapprove it, correct?
that can't be done in one motion?
No, because I want to vote against having a rule. You see? I want-
Fine. All right.
Why?
No, I said.
Because all of my reasons for being opposed,
No, that's not what I said.
oh, I thought you said why.
Fine, no.
I said fine.
Okay.
You couldn't hate me because of my math.
Okay, let's have motion number one. Ian, or Yoshi, would you like to read it and then we'll say it's so moved?
Okay, I'm sorry, what am I supposed to read?
Just what was your idea?
Oh, just changing the wording
Changing
and
the
the
wording.
requirements to wear face coverings to shall require both staff and customers or visitors to wear CDC recommended face coverings over their nose and mouth while inside establishment. And other exceptions, but CDC recommended face coverings are not required on young children under age 5.
Great. Okay. Someone
So moved.
say so moved. Great. All those in favor of the language changes as illustrated by our new town manager, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, item number 2. Would someone like to make a motion to renew the mask mandate as amended?
I move to approve the mask mandate rule as amended.
Great.
Yeah.
Ian has moved to renew the mask mandate with the language as amended. All select board members in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Is there a select board member who would vote no?
I will say no, and please, everyone, wear your mask. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. There's one last motion that I will entertain. Jessica,
Sure, I move that we adjourn.
thank you very much. Thank you.
Let's say Carl.
Oh, I always forget that part. All select board members in favor of adjourning, please raise your hand. Thank
Aye.
you.
Aye.
Unanimous. What a shock.
Thank you.
Thank you.